Hey, what's up nerds? Welcome back to the channel. This is Shoot Move Edit, and in this video we're going to finish out this small series on the technical basics of photography. So far we've covered aperture, we've covered shutter speed, and now we're going to cover ISO, what that is and how we use it in photography. So what is ISO? Well, compared to the other two settings of aperture and shutter speed, ISO is actually pretty simple. ISO is simply the sensitivity of the camera's sensor, meaning that the higher the ISO, the more sensitive your camera's sensor is. You can find the ISO settings on your camera displayed as ISO and then a number. So for example, you can see ISO 100, ISO 200, ISO 1600. The lowest setting, usually on camera models, is ISO 100. However, on some camera models, like the Nikon I'm shooting on right now, can actually go down to ISO 100. Now on the complete opposite end, on the high end, the ISO on this camera can go up to 200,000. However, it's displayed as high 2.0. So to simply sum that all up, the higher your ISO number, the brighter your exposure is going to be, the brighter your image. The lower the ISO number, the darker your image, the darker the exposure. So check out these quick clips of simply just changing the ISO in an image. One is just going to be simply brighter than the other. Nothing else. Aperture is going to be the same. Shutter speed is going to be the same. The only difference is ISO. Nothing else in the image has changed except the exposure level. So if you're shooting on a film camera, this ISO concept still applies. So look at your film. Is there a number on it? Chances are there should be. If you check, say, Fujifilm Superia, that should have an ISO of 400. And if you check, say, Kodak Ektar, that should have a ISO of 100. Concept's still the same. So if you're using the Fujifilm Superia, that is going to have a brighter image, and you have to adjust the settings to compensate for that higher ISO. So there is one primary drawback to using ISO, and that is the introduction of digital noise or grain in your image. What this actually looks like. So if you're in the low ISOs, so ISO 64, 100, 200, maybe a little bit higher for newer camera models, your images are going to come out clean, crisp, and sharp. However, once you start bumping that ISO up to say 1000, 2000, then you'll start to introduce digital noise and grain into your image. Now, if your goal is to maintain the cleanest image possible, grain isn't a good thing. However, if you're going for a very film-like aesthetic for your images, grain in your image is actually a good thing, and it can achieve the visual appearance that you want. However, if you start going up into the drastically high ISOs, such as 100,000 and 200,000, my personal opinion, it's disgusting, and those images are pretty much useless. And this concept applies to film as well. The lower the ISO, the cleaner your image is going to look. So Ektar 100, your images are going to come out clean. If you start using ISOs of 1600 or even 3200, they do have that, you're definitely going to get a lot of grain in your image. So for my own photography, the way I shoot, I typically like to keep my ISO as low as possible, keeping my images as clean as possible. However, there are plenty of situations to where there might be a specific moment, especially in a dark environment, where like I need to capture that moment, like a certain scene's going on, specific gestures, a special moment is happening. Then I feel convicted to take the shot, and so I'm willing to bump up my ISO to capture it. The situations in which I typically crank up my ISO are in low light situations. However, I still need to have a high enough shutter speed to capture specific moments or events that are happening. An example of this would be, say, an evening party and it's indoors. I have a speed light, however, the ceilings are too high for the speed light to actually be effective to bounce off of. So I would crank up my ISO and use that. So now we went over aperture, we went over shutter speed, and we went over ISO. And that covers the three technical basics of photography. Now get out your cameras and start fiddling around with those settings and start experimenting with different subjects in different environments and in different lighting conditions. And now try to get the image that you're looking for. So for my goal for this channel is to continue to serve you guys and teach you guys in topics of photography and in other technical aspects of content creation like audio and video. If there are any other topics or you have any questions that you'd like me to do a video on, please let me know in the comments below so I can continue to serving you guys. Until that next video, later.